rain whispered against the windows of Charnwood Manor, as the storm rolled across the estate like a warning unheeded. In the cavernous kitchen, usually alive with the clang of pans and chatter of the staff, silence reigned. A single copper pot lay overturned, gleaming dully beneath the electric lights. And beside it, sprawled upon the tiles as if felled mid-stride, was the body of famed culinary aristocrat Lord Alistair Harwood, his face twisted in a final expression of terror. Chapter 1. The Silent Kitchen. Rain rolled across Charnwood Manor in sheets, the sort of relentless downpour that turned the countryside into a watercolour smear of grey and green. It drummed upon the high windows like impatient fingers tapping upon a door, demanding entrance. Electricity flickered above the estate, illuminating its stony facade in violent flashes. But within the grand manor, hushed, cavernous and uneasy, the true storm was gathering below, deep in the belly of the house. The kitchen had always been the heartbeat of Charnwood Manor. Even the wealthiest houses of England rarely possessed such a room. Immense, cathedral-ceilinged, filled with copper pans that gleamed like soldiers awaiting command, their polished surfaces reflecting every flicker of candlelight. Usually it was alive with movement, scurrying servants, bubbling pots, and the sharp, comforting aroma of herbs crushed between calloused fingers. But tonight, all was still, too still, like a theatre stage moments after the final curtain falls. Inspector Graves stood stiffly near the wooden prep table, his boots making small puddles across the tiles where rainwater dripped from his coat. His expression was one of controlled irritation, as though murder, even at such an hour, were an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. His moustache bristled with each sigh he tried to suppress. Opposite him, kneeling near the body with the precision of a jeweller studying a rare stone, was Hercule Poirot, the famed Belgian detective whose reputation had travelled far beyond the English Channel. His immaculate suit seemed impervious to the cold dampness of the room. His polished shoes glimmered in defiance of the grime at his feet, and his moustache, magnificent, symmetrical, proud, stood as the only ornamentation in an otherwise sombre scene. The corpse lay sprawled beside a toppled copper pot, the pot's rounded side reflecting the pale, lifeless face of Lord Alistair Harwood, the master of the estate and a culinary aristocrat revered and reviled in equal measure. Harwood's expression was one of frozen terror, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly parted, as if he had attempted, in his last breath, to utter the name of his murderer. Poirot tilted his head gently. "Mon pauvre monsieur." His voice, though soft, cut through the oppressive silence. A man cannot scream at death, but he can see it coming. Inspector Graves huffed. The chef found him at dawn. Basil Trent, young fellow, claimed he came in to begin preparations for the gala. Found his master like this. Poirot rose with slow elegance. "Tell me, Inspector, do you see disorder here?" Graves blinked. "Disorder? The man's dead, Poirot." "Yes," Poirot replied, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve. "But even death creates a pattern, does it not? Yet here, the pattern is interrupted." He gestured lightly to the overturned chair, the spilled broth forming a dark patch across the tiles, the cutlery drawer slightly ajar. Too subtle for a struggle, too deliberate for an accident. Graves grumbled something unintelligible before clearing his throat. No signs of forced entry, no valuables missing. Could have collapsed from overwork. These cooking types pushed themselves far too hard. Poirot ignored the suggestion. His sharp eyes drifted across the surfaces, absorbing details others dismissed. a streak of broth glistening faintly, a spice jar half an inch out of line, a cutting board recently wiped but not dried. Aromas hung faintly in the air, garlic, thyme, lemon peel. Yet beneath them all was something sharper, metallic, unnatural. Basil Trent, Harwood's protégé, hovered near the kitchen doorway, his youthful face pale beneath his mop of dark hair. His chef's coat bore stains from the night before, though whether from cooking or panic was unclear. His hands shook when he tried to speak. I didn't touch anything," Basil sputtered the moment Poirot approached him. "I swear it. I just came in and saw him, lying there. He wasn't supposed to be here this late." Poirot raised an eyebrow. No, but the great Lord Harwood, he was a perfectionist, n'est-ce pas? The kitchen was his sanctuary, a place where he controlled every grain of salt, every chop of the knife. Basil swallowed. He did stay late sometimes, but he never cooked alone. Said genius deserved an audience. Poirot gave a small smile. Genius, perhaps, but genius can also breed enemies. Before Basil could reply, another figure entered, Eleanor Harwood, widow of the deceased. She moved with the elegance of a woman accustomed to hosting soirées and greeting diplomats, but her face was pale, and her hands clutched her shawl as though shielding herself from an unseen draught. Even her pearls seemed to tremble against her neck. "Mr. Poirot," she murmured, voice strained, "I was told you wished to see the body before it was moved. I cannot bear to look." Poirot bowed his head respectfully. "Madame, your loss is great. I offer my condolences." Her lips tightened. "My husband was a complicated man, brilliant in his passions, but cruel in his judgments. He pushed himself and others beyond reason." Poirot's gaze sharpened, though his tone remained gentle. "And yet, madame, you remained by his side." Her eyes flickered. "One does what one must." The ambiguity of her answer lingered in the air like smoke. Poirot turned his attention back to the body. With gloved hands he lifted Lord Harwood's arm slightly, examining the stiffness, the coloration. His fingers drifted to Harwood's lips, blue-green, edges darkened. Not the sign of a simple fall. Poirot straightened. "Inspector Graves, this man did not die from injury alone. There is a scent, faint but unmistakable." Graves leaned in, sniffed and recoiled instantly. "Smells like burnt metal?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, you notice it too. A smell often associated with certain poisons, but which one I cannot yet say." Graves groaned. "Poison! Always poison! Why can't people just hit each other with blunt objects like in the old days?" Poirot tapped the side of his nose. "Because poison requires planning, and planning reveals motive." He moved to the copper pot beside the body, turning it slowly. Inside lay a residue, thin, film-like, slightly iridescent under the harsh kitchen lights. "What is this?" Poirot murmured. Basil leaned in, swallowing hard. He was working on a new broth, something for the gala. He wouldn't let me taste it. Said I wasn't ready." Poirot's expression darkened dangerously. "He tasted it himself, no?" Basil nodded. "And now he lies dead." Eleanor let out a soft, strangled gasp. Poirot extended one delicate finger, circling the pot's interior without touching it. "This residue, too crystalline for herbs, too stiff for oil. Something was added, something that should not have been." His gaze drifted downward, and then he saw it. Beneath the stove, partially hidden by a shadow and a fallen rag, was a small glass vial. He crouched with great care, lifting it between thumb and forefinger. It was empty, but not clean. A faint coating clung to the inside, giving off a metallic odour. Poirot inhaled and whispered, Antimony, perhaps. A poison used in history, bitter, unmistakable. Inspector Graves stiffened. Poirot, are you saying this is murder? Poirot rose slowly, placing the vial into a handkerchief. I'm saying, mon ami, that Lord Harwood did not die by accident. Someone tampered with his culinary creation. Someone planned this. Graves scratched his chin. So someone slipped poison into the pot? Easy enough, given how much broth these chefs make. Poirot shook his head. No, too simple. Look around you. Every tool is placed with meticulous order. Every spice jar aligned. Every knife cleaned. This was not a kitchen where mistakes were made. He drifted toward the spice rack, running a finger along the labels. Each jar faced outward with maddening precision. Each lid gleamed. And yet, one jar sat slightly askew, ground coriander. Poirot lifted it, opened it, sniffed. Ah, his moustache twitched. Someone opened this recently, but not for cooking. Basil frowned. I didn't use coriander last night. Poirot replaced the jar carefully. No, you did not. But someone else did. Perhaps to mask the bitterness of poison. Eleanor clutched her shawl tighter. Surely you don't believe someone in this house is capable of such a thing. Poirot looked at her steadily. Madame, it is Hercule Poirot's unfortunate experience that even the grandest houses conceal the darkest secrets. His gaze shifted to the servants' corridor. A faint scuff mark grazed the floor, muddy, half-dried, pointing toward the pantry door. Poirot followed the trail, stepping lightly. Inside the pantry, everything was in perfect order, except for a single shelf. A jar of preserved lemon wedges had toppled, rolling across the floor. Its lid was loose, although the seal appeared intact. Poirot lifted the jar to the light. Interesting, he murmured, so very interesting. Graves folded his arms. What in the world is significant about lemons? Poirot smiled faintly. Lemons are sharp, Inspector. They hide bitterness, just as lies often hide within the truth. Before Graves could protest, footsteps approached. Light, hurried, nervous. Marian Wickford, the housekeeper, appeared at the doorway. Her eyes were wide, flickering with fear. I heard shouting, she stammered. Is everything, oh dear Lord? Her face turned ashen as she saw her employer's body. Poirot watched her carefully. Marian Wickford had served the Harwood family for almost 20 years. She knew every creak, every shadow, every whisper of Charnwood Manor. Yet her apron smelled faintly, not of breakfast preparations or coffee, but of roasted garlic. Freshly roasted garlic. Poirot stepped closer. Madame Wickford, you did not come to the kitchen this morning, but last night, perhaps. She froze. One of the servants said the pipes were rattling. I came to check the taps. I didn't linger. Poirot narrowed his eyes. Is that so? Yes, she insisted, though her trembling betrayed her. Poirot stored that detail away. One by one, the details were knitting together. Clues, motives, half-truths, and subtle betrayals forming the edges of a tapestry not yet complete. He returned to the body once more. The faint discoloration on Harwood's lips. The cooked broth residue. The empty vial. The spilled coriander. The toppled lemon jar. The bloodless fall. And something else. Something he had only now realized. Poirot leaned closer, lowering his voice to a nearly reverent whisper. The heat, Inspector Graves. The stove. It is cold. Stone cold. Graves frowned. So, Poirot continued, if Lord Harwood was cooking, the stove should still hold warmth, even hours later. Graves blinked. Then what does that mean? Poirot straightened, his expression sharpened by revelation. "It means, mon ami, that this dish was prepared not by Harwood at all." He paused, "and therefore this is no accident of passion. This is a carefully choreographed murder." Eleanor Harwood gasped. Basil Trent muttered a curse. Marion Wickford trembled. Inspector Graves turned pale. Chapter 2. The button beneath the pot. The copper pot gave a soft metallic groan as Poirot tilted it, its polished rim catching a glint of lantern light. The tile floor beneath was slick with cooled broth, but the little object half embedded in the puddle was unmistakably out of place. A tiny button, polished yet scratched at its edges, the kind one might find upon a tailored servant's uniform or an expensive, bespoke coat. Poirot lifted it delicately with his handkerchief, examining its rich design, its pearl-grey sheen. Inspector Graves muttered, "A button? That's your grand discovery?" Poirot closed the handkerchief gently, almost reverently. "Every thread of truth begins with a single stitch, Inspector. And buttons? Buttons are the most deceitful of all. They flee from their owners in moments of stress, conflict, or haste." He turned to the room. Basil Trent, Eleanor Harwood, and Marion Wickford all watched him with rigid expressions, fear, suspicion, bewilderment. The remnants of the storm outside shuddered through the old manor walls, casting flickers of light across their faces. Poirot studied each of them as though reading a paragraph from an incomplete story. "Now," he said softly, "let us begin." He gestured toward the long wooden table. "Madame Harwood, Mademoiselle Wickford, Monsieur Basil, please join us. We must all sit. The truth, she prefers a proper audience." Reluctantly, they complied. Basil's nervous fidgeting resumed the moment he sat down, his foot tapping an anxious rhythm upon the tile. He looked thin, exhausted, but guilt did not immediately emanate from him. Rather fear. Fear of being accused, fear of the truth being revealed, fear of confessing something he dared not speak. Marion Wickford perched stiffly at the edge of her chair, clutching her apron with white-knuckled fingers. The lines of age carved into her face seemed freshly deepened by the morning's horror. Eleanor Harwood, however, carried her grief with a peculiar restraint. She sat upright, elegant even in mourning, though her eyes remained fixed not upon Poirot or her husband's body, but upon the kitchen door, as if expecting someone or something to enter. Poirot folded his hands neatly. "Tell me," he began, "how many of you entered this kitchen after Lord Harwood retired last night?" A tense silence. The only sound, the slow dripping of rain from Basil's hair. Eleanor spoke first, her voice weak but steady. I did not. Alistair was meticulous about his late-night culinary experiments. I learned never to interrupt." Poirot nodded. "And you, Madame Wickford?" The housekeeper hesitated. I only came to check on the pipes, as I told you. The manor is old, Monsieur Poirot. Taps rattle, boilers hiss. A house like this demands attention." Poirot eyed her, noting the way she twisted her apron. "And you heard no commotion?" "No," she said swiftly, too swiftly. Poirot turned at last to Basil. "And you, Monsieur Trent?" Basil swallowed hard. "I left after midnight. He told me I was dismissed for the night. Said he wanted to experiment alone." Poirot tapped his fingers lightly against the button. "Forgive me, but I must ask, what was Lord Harwood attempting to prepare so late? A dish for your gala? Oui, but what dish?" Basil's eyes darted to Eleanor. She offered no guidance. I think it was meant to be a revival broth. Something rich, something bold. He said it would astonish the guests." Poirot leaned forward. "Revival? What do you mean?" Basil shrugged helplessly. He said the broth would awaken dull senses. He spoke in riddles sometimes. He was brilliant, yes, but unpredictable. Poirot considered this. And did Lord Harwood allow you to assist? No, Basil whispered. He forbade it. Said the dish required hands untainted by mediocrity. Poirot hummed a note of disapproval. Such arrogance often breeds resentment. Eleanor pressed a trembling hand to her lips. Monsieur Poirot, do you believe someone resented him enough to kill him? Poirot responded with a soft but chilling calm. Madam, everyone in this room may have harboured resentment. Resentment alone does not make a murderer, but opportunity, motive. These we must uncover. He rose, moving toward the spice rack once more. His steps were light, precise, as if dancing with invisible clues. I observed earlier that the jar of coriander had been disturbed, Poirot said. A subtle detail. And yet, Lord Harwood was particular about such things. Mademoiselle Wickford, did you tidy the shelves last night? The housekeeper shook her head. I left them exactly as they were before dinner service. He would have noticed even a centimetre out of place. I would not risk his ire. Poirot smiled. But someone did risk it. His hand drifted along the spice jars, stopping when he reached the coriander once more. He lifted it, turned it, and then inhaled. This aroma, Poirot said softly, is faint, masked, but unmistakable. Graves frowned. We already talked about that. You think poison was mixed inside? Poirot shook his head. No, not inside. The coriander hid the scent on Lord Harwood's hands after he handled something toxic. The detective then returned to the copper pot. This broth was not merely cooked. It was altered. He dipped a glass stirring rod into the residue, letting a thin sheen cling to its tip. Observe the shimmer. Not natural. Even the finest oils cannot create this iridescence. This is a signature of heavy metal compounds. Eleanor blanched. Poirot, please, what killed my husband? Poirot lifted his eyes. An antimony derivative, most likely. It induces vomiting, convulsions, cardiac arrest. A cruel death for anyone, especially a man alone, Inspector. Graves grumbled. We'll wait for the lab results before jumping to conclusions. Poirot waved this off. By all means, Inspector, but Hercule Poirot does not require a laboratory to see a pattern. He paused, then held up the button once again. And this, Inspector, is the missing piece. For this button belongs not to Lord Harwood, nor to Basil, nor to Madame Harwood. He placed it gently upon the table. It belongs, Poirot continued, to a uniform of Charnwood Manor, a servant's coat. Marian Wickford stiffened immediately. Poirot's eyes flicked toward her. Madame Wickford, may I see your coat? The housekeeper's breath caught. My coat! Why, Before she could stammer further, Basil, surprisingly, intervened. It's not hers, Poirot. The housekeepers wear black matte buttons. That one's polished, indented around the edges. That's from the footman's livery. Poirot's attention sharpened. Interesting. And the footman, he is Gareth Copley, Marian whispered. But he doesn't work nights. He was dismissed early yesterday, complained of a migraine. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. And where is he now? Eleanor's voice trembled. He should be in the servants' quarters, Monsieur Poirot. I can send for him. Poirot shook his head. No need. I will go myself. Basil, Inspector, accompany me. Madame Harwood, Madame Wickford, please remain here. Eleanor looked relieved. Marian looked faint. Poirot gestured for Graves to lead the way. They left the kitchen in near silence, save for the rumbling thunder outside. The corridor was narrow, dim, and smelled faintly of soap and damp linen. Gas lamps sputtered along the walls, casting uneven shadows. The storm had quieted, but the house remained tense, as though bracing for another strike. Poirot paused at the footman's door. "Knock, if you please, Inspector." Graves rapped his knuckles firmly. No answer. Basil swallowed. He should be here. He rarely leaves the manor. Poirot nodded once, then turned the handle. Unlocked. The door creaked open to reveal a small room, neatly kept, modest, but empty. The bed was made, the wash-basin clean, but the wardrobe door stood ajar. Poirot stepped forward, pulling the wardrobe open fully. Inside hung a single coat, the footman's uniform. Poirot touched the sleeve, counted the buttons, one was missing. Graves cursed under his breath. Poirot smiled thinly. And so the plot gained seasoning. He reached deeper into the wardrobe. At the bottom lay a pair of muddy boots. The soles bore a distinctive pattern, matching the faint scuff in the kitchen pantry. Poirot stood up slowly. Gareth Copley was here, and he was not alone last night. Basil paled. "You mean he came to the kitchen?" Poirot nodded. "Oui." And he attempted to hide his visit. "But Mud, she is a poor conspirator." Then his eyes drifted upwards to the shelf above the coat rack, where a small object protruded from under a folded towel. Poirot lifted it carefully. A second vial, this one half full. Graves let out a whistle. "Well, that settles it. The footman poisoned him." Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami, it settles nothing." He held the vial to the light. "Poison is like a signature. Anyone can write it. The question is, who forged Gareth Copley's handwriting?" Basil looked confused. "You mean someone framed him?" Poirot bowed slightly. "Precisely. And who would benefit from his disgrace, or from Lord Harwood's death?" He slipped the vial into his pocket. "We must find Gareth Copley, alive if possible. His story may yet reveal the missing ingredient." When Poirot, Basil and Graves returned, they found Eleanor and Marion whispering in strained tones. Eleanor straightened the moment Poirot entered. "Was Gareth in his room?" she asked. Poirot bowed gently. "Alas, non, he has vanished." Both women gasped. Poirot paced slowly around the kitchen, fingertips tracing the air as if outlining the shape of an invisible clue. "This is what we know," he said in a measured tone. "Lord Harwood died by poison. The poison was administered through a dish he tasted late last night. Someone entered this kitchen after Basil left. A footman's button and muddy tracks tie Gareth Copley to this room. But the cold stove tells us Lord Harwood did not cook his own meal." Poirot halted. "And therefore Gareth Copley is either a victim of manipulation or a conspirator." Eleanor's voice trembled. "But who would wish to manipulate him?" Poirot's eyes drifted toward Marion Wickford. But before he could speak, Basil suddenly bolted upright. "Wait, listen!" A faint sound echoed from the servants' corridor. A distant thud, a muffled groan. Poirot's eyes widened. "Hurry!" They rushed toward the sound, Graves pushing ahead with grim determination. At the far end of the corridor, near the rear staircase, lay a crumpled figure motionless on the floor, clothes soaked, skin pallid, breath shallow. Gareth Copley, barely alive. Poirot knelt beside him. "Gareth, monsieur, can you hear me?" The footman's eyes fluttered open. His lips trembled, a sheen of sweat covered his brow. Poirot, he rasped, barely audible. I didn't, I swear." Poirot leaned closer. "What didn't you do, mon jeune homme?" Gareth struggled, fingers twitching weakly as though reaching for someone unseen. They made me. "Go to the kitchen," he whispered. "Told me to fetch," his voice cracked, "something for him." Poirot froze. "Who told you, Gareth? Who?" Gareth's eyes rolled back. His voice turned faint as a dying candle. Poirot leaned in urgently. "Who is her, Gareth? Who?" But Gareth Copley slipped into unconsciousness before the final word could leave his lips. Poirot stared at the young man, his expression grave. Then he rose, turned slowly toward the kitchen, where Eleanor Harwood and Marion Wickford waited, pale and trembling. Chapter 3. The Footsteps in Flower. A pale dawn mist clung to the grand estate of Lord Cavendish, as Hercule Poirot stepped back into the kitchen, the domain that had become both crime scene and cradle of secrets. The constables had cleared out, leaving behind only the scent of extinguished candles, cold steel surfaces, and the faintest echo of the previous night's terror. Poirot paused at the threshold, as though asking permission to disturb the slumbering silence. The kitchen did not answer, but the cold air welcomed him in with a chill down his spine. Everything felt too neat. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, eyes narrowing. "There is order, yes," he murmured to himself, "but not the sort of order nature makes. This, monsieur, is the order of fear." What remained of the flour spill, long since stepped in by someone who should not have been there, drew him forward. The constables had marked the area with chalk outlines, but Poirot knelt to study what little remained. The footprints were faint, incomplete, nearly swept away. A deliberate gesture, Poirot reasoned, not carelessness. He rose, tapping his moustache. Someone corrected their mistake. As he paced, his gaze fell upon the long wooden prep table. He noticed a cutting board, perfectly clean, beside a stack of carrots left half-peeled. Odd. In a kitchen accustomed to routine, no chef would leave work half-done, unless interrupted. Or unless the carrots were placed there later for show. Poirot slipped on gloves and inspected the board. The faintest groove of a knife cut bore residue, not vegetables, but something darker. A smear so thin one could miss it. Poirot collected a sample with a cotton swab. At that moment, Mrs. Wycliffe, the housekeeper, appeared in the doorway, her grey hair pinned tight and her expression worn. "Inspector said you'd be down here again, sir. I brought the household list you requested." Poirot thanked her with a small bow. "Madame, you were here yesterday morning, were you not, overseeing breakfast?" "Yes, Mr. Poirot. I'm always the first to arrive in the kitchen." "And did you, by any chance, notice disorder? Anything unusual?" She hesitated. A tremor crossed her lips. "Well, the flour bin was open. It's never left that way. And one of the knives was missing from the wall rack. Chef Armand is meticulous about those knives. Wouldn't even let the scullery boys touch them." Poirot gestured toward the empty slot on the rack. "That absence. Has anyone found the missing blade?" "No, sir." Poirot's eyes followed the rack's shadow on the wall. A missing knife, an open flour bin, half-prepared vegetables. All small things, but together they formed a crooked pattern. When the world tilts, Poirot thought, it is the tiny items that slide first. "Merci, madame. One more question. Who has access to the kitchen at night?" "Well, besides Chef Armand and the staff, Lord Cavendish sometimes walks through during his late strolls. The young Lady Madeline came in once or twice for tea. And," she swallowed, "Mr. Hugo, the brother of the deceased. The same. He liked to drink in the lounge and wander when he was in a mood. Said the kitchen reminded him of their mother." She rubbed her palms together. "Forgive me for saying it, but he was volatile. Gentle at times, but when distressed, he could explode." Poirot thanked her again as she withdrew. The door closed softly, like a curtain falling at the end of a scene. Poirot's mind stitched details together, footprints half erased, a missing knife, a cutting board cleaned too well, and a volatile man with access to the kitchen. He stepped toward the pantry door. It was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. A rush of cold air greeted him. The shelves were immaculate, almost obsessively so. Jars faced forward, labels aligned, spices alphabetized. Poirot tilted his head. Perfection can be as suspicious as chaos. A glint caught his eye near the bottom shelf. Something metallic, wedged between flour sacks. Poirot crouched and used tweezers to extract it. A button, dark, polished, expensive. Not from kitchen uniforms, not from staff aprons. A gentleman's coat button. Poirot pocketed it, his heart quickening. He stood and examined the sacks more closely. One bore a faint handprint, as though someone steadied themselves or stumbled. He traced the outline with his fingers. Not clumsy work. Someone moving in haste, in panic, perhaps in darkness. He turned out of the pantry and paused before the door. The morning sun through the high windows cast long bars of light across the kitchen floor, illuminating every dust mote. Poirot observed a subtle trail of flour, almost invisible, leading toward the servants' corridor. He followed. A corridor of narrow stone walls, lined with old portraits of long-forgotten cooks, stretched ahead. The flour trail thinned, then thickened again in faint bursts, suggesting the culprit tried brushing it from their shoes. Poirot followed it to a small side door that opened into the courtyard. He stepped outside. The crisp air bit his cheeks. The courtyard was empty, but for a stack of firewood and a few flower pots. There, a single partial footprint in the dirt. Poirot bent low. It was the same pattern as the one from the flour in the kitchen. Poirot glanced toward the gardener's shed. Its door was locked with a heavy iron latch. "Curious," he whispered. "If our visitor came out this way, why leave no further tracks?" The answer came to him swiftly. Because they changed shoes. Poirot returned inside. He walked slowly, his mind unfolding possibilities like petals. He re-entered the kitchen and stood in the center, listening to the room as though it might speak. "The killer moves with caution, but not with expertise," he said softly. "They know the house, but they do not know the habits of evidence." A distant clock chimed the hour. Poirot gathered his notes, preparing to interview Hugo Cavendish next. But before leaving, he turned one last time toward the pantry. There was a faint metallic clink. Poirot froze. He waited. Another sound, soft, deliberate, like something shifting against wood. He stepped slowly toward the door, each footfall precise. His hand reached for the handle. He opened it swiftly. Darkness stared back. Shelves unmoved, room silent, no sign of disturbance. Yet Poirot knew, his instincts rarely lied, that someone had been there. Listening, watching, perhaps hiding just moments before. He exhaled through his nose, calm but sharpened. "The game," he whispered, "is becoming dangerous." And with that, Poirot left the kitchen, a place now far more haunted by secrets than he had first imagined. Chapter 4. Hugo's Trembling Hands. The drawing-room of Cavendish Manor held the kind of heavy silence that seems to sag beneath its own weight. Dark velvet curtains muffled the morning light, while the fireplace crackled faintly, throwing shifting shadows on the Persian carpets. Hercule Poirot entered with measured composure, adjusting his immaculate cuffs as though he was stepping onto a stage. In this house of secrets, every room was a theatre, and every occupant a performer, some clever, some desperate, all suspicious. Hugo Cavendish sat slumped in a leather armchair, a glass of whiskey untouched on the side table beside him. He was younger than his late brother Charles by perhaps a decade, slight of frame, and pale as if sleep had been rationed to him in cruel proportions. His eyes, dark-hollowed, restless, followed Poirot's approach with the alertness of a cornered animal. "Mr. Poirot," he said hoarsely, "they told me you wished to speak with me again." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, monsieur. I appreciate your time. The investigation progresses, and your assistance may prove invaluable." Hugo's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Have you found anything?" Poirot studied him for a long heartbeat. "I have found many somethings, Monsieur Cavendish. Whether they are of value, that depends." He folded his hands behind his back, pacing slowly. "I should like to understand your movements last night." Hugo rubbed his temple. "I told the inspector everything. I drank alone in the lounge. I walked about. I could not sleep. My thoughts were scattered. My brother and I," his breath cracked, "we were not on good terms." Poirot stopped. "No, monsieur, you were not. And yet you entered the kitchen last night." Hugo stiffened. "Who said that?" "Evidence," Poirot replied lightly. "Footprints in flour. A button from a gentleman's coat found in the pantry." He watched Hugo's reaction closely. The man flinched as though struck. "Monsieur, do you still have the coat you wore?" The trembling began, subtle at first, then visible in his fingertips. I misplaced it." "Misplaced," Poirot repeated softly. "Curious. A man misplaces a glove, perhaps, a hat, but a coat? And on the night of his brother's murder?" Poirot leaned in slightly, his voice carrying the gentlest pressure. "This is not good, monsieur." Hugo clasped his hands as if to hold himself together. "I didn't kill him," he whispered. "I swear on my mother's grave, I didn't kill Charles. We argued, yes, we always argued, but murder? No, I went into the kitchen only for water." "Water," Poirot echoed. "Very well. And did you find the water?" Hugo blinked. "What?" "It is a simple question. Did you find the water?" His lips quivered. "The jug was empty. I left, that's all." Poirot allowed a pause to stretch between them, letting Hugo feel the weight of his own explanations. When the tension reached its breaking point, Poirot shifted his tone. "Let us discuss the knife, monsieur." Hugo's breath hitched. "Knife?" "A particular knife is missing from the kitchen, a very sharp one, very clean before it vanished. You would not know where it is." The young man shook his head violently, almost panicked. "No, no, why would I? Look, my brother and I hated each other sometimes, yes, but I'd never—" Poirot held up a hand, silencing him without force. "Monsieur Cavendish, you are distressed, you are afraid. This I can see, but you are not afraid because your brother is dead. You are afraid because you are hiding something." The accusation struck like a hammer. Hugo clutched the armrests, knuckles bleaching. He opened his mouth, closed it, then buried his face in his hands. A long, shuddering breath escaped him. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he whispered. "I tried to stop it, but I was too late." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Stop what, monsieur?" Hugo shook his head helplessly. "If I tell you, they'll destroy me. The whole family will. Charles was not the man he pretended to be." Poirot sat opposite him, leaning forward with careful grace. "You are speaking in riddles, mon ami. If you wish to help yourself, and perhaps honor your brother's memory, you must be clear." After a torturous moment, Hugo lifted his face. His eyes were wet but no longer frantic, as though resignation had replaced fear. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll tell you the truth, but only part of it, for now." Poirot inclined his head, granting him space. "Charles," Hugo began, "was involved in something dangerous, something that brought people into this house. People who should never have crossed our threshold. He stored things here. Items, documents, I don't know the full extent. but I know enough to know he wasn't acting alone." Poirot's brows rose. "So your brother had enemies?" "Yes, and I believe one of them came here. Last night, I wasn't in the kitchen for water. I was searching for whatever Charles hid. I wanted to destroy it before anyone else found it, but something or someone was already there." Hugo swallowed hard. "I heard a sound in the pantry, like metal, like a knife. I panicked and ran. I left my coat behind." Poirot's gaze sharpened like a blade. "So you did encounter someone?" "Yes. And yet," Poirot said softly, "you did not mention this to the police." "Would you?" Hugo whispered. "If speaking the truth meant implicating your own family in a secret that could ruin everything and everyone you know?" Poirot did not answer. Instead, he stood slowly. "You have given me much, monsieur, and yet not enough." Hugo bowed his head, defeated. Poirot walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the brass handle. "One last question, Monsieur Cavendish. This coat you lost, did it have all its buttons?" Hugo's silence was confirmation. Poirot nodded. "Then I advise you not to leave the estate. Things are coming into view, and soon they will be impossible to hide." He stepped out into the corridor, closing the door behind him. As he walked away, he allowed himself one quiet thought. Whatever Charles Cavendish was entangled in, it was not merely domestic quarrel. It was a storm, and Hugo was only the first to feel its winds. Chapter 5. The Late Chef Armand. The aroma of simmering broth and freshly chopped herbs usually defined the kitchen of Cavendish Manor. But as Hercule Poirot entered for the second time that afternoon, he found instead the chilly echo of tension, one that seemed to cling to every copper pot and dangling utensil like invisible dust. At the centre of this unease stood Chef Armand Duclair, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face as hard as tempered steel, and a moustache nearly as proud as Poirot's own. But whereas Poirot's moustache exuded refinement, Chef Armand's bristled like the quills of a threatened hedgehog. "You wish to see me?" Armand said without turning, his heavy hands chopping parsley with intimidating speed. "I was told you had questions about the night of the murder." "Indeed, monsieur." Poirot approached with his characteristic grace, hands neatly folded. "Your kingdom, the cuisine, has become the stage of a tragedy. It seems only fair that its reigning monarch should enlighten me." Armand scoffed, sweeping herbs into a neat pile. "Monarch or not, Inspector, I have meals to prepare. These people, rich or not, must still eat." Poirot circled him slowly, observing the meticulous arrangement of knives, the spotless surfaces, the precise alignment of pots. "You are a man of order," he murmured. "Everything in its place, everything with purpose." Armand's jaw tightened. "Yes, unlike certain intrusions that occurred last night." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Ah, you noticed something." For the first time, the chef looked at him. His eyes were dark, flinty, and tired. "I noticed many things, but whether they matter to your investigation, you will decide." Poirot nodded. "Then let us begin. Did you see Monsieur Hugo Cavendish in the kitchen?" Armand's expression stiffened. "He was here. He came stumbling in around midnight, reeking of whiskey. He rummaged about like a rat, knocking things over, muttering nonsense." "Did he take anything?" "Not that I saw. But he left the flour bin open. I scolded him for it." Armand resumed chopping as though the memory irritated him afresh. "I told him he should not be in my kitchen unsupervised." Poirot allowed himself a soft smile. "And after that, chef? Did Hugo leave?" Armand paused mid-chop. "Oui, but someone else came shortly after." Poirot's eyes brightened. Someone else? A shadow, Armand said slowly. I heard footsteps, light, deliberate, not the stumbling clumsiness of the young monsieur. Someone moving with intent. Poirot leaned in. Did you see this person? No. Armand's voice lowered. But I heard the pantry door, and something metallic, a soft clink. His gaze flickered toward the pantry now, as though afraid it might whisper back. I approached. The noise stopped. When I opened the door, no one. Poirot folded his arms. So you too heard the silent visitor. Armand nodded grimly. The kitchen was wrong last night, Monsieur Poirot. Something was brewing other than soup. Poirot paced, examining the hanging ladles. Tell me, chef, one of your knives is missing. Armand's face shadowed with fury. The filleting knife, my finest blade, perfect balance, razor sharp, I would never misplace it. And yet, Poirot murmured, it is gone. Armand slammed his hand against the counter, making the herb pile scatter. It was stolen? Poirot observed him calmly. By whom, in your estimation? Armand wiped his palms, his tone grave. Someone who knows knives. Someone who knows exactly what a blade like that can do. Poirot let the silence cradle Armand's words before speaking. Chef, you care deeply for this kitchen, yet you were not here at the time of the murder. Where were you? Armand stiffened. I was in my quarters, asleep. Poirot gave him a look of gentle skepticism. Asleep, or reluctant to admit your true whereabouts. The chef bristled. Are you accusing me? Poirot shook his head. No, monsieur. I am simply observing the tension in your voice, the defensiveness in your posture, the fear. Armand's shoulders sagged, a heavy sigh escaping him. I am not afraid for myself, Mr. Poirot. I am afraid for this house, for what may come next. Poirot's brows arched. Next? Armand hesitated. His fingers tapped nervously against the counter. There have been whispers among the staff, he said, quietly. Of strangers approaching the back gate. Of late-night deliveries Charles Cavendish signed for himself. No staff present. No explanations given. Poirot leaned closer. What sort of deliveries? Armand lowered his voice to a near whisper. Crates, unmarked, heavy, and once a locked briefcase, handed over by a man whose face was hidden beneath a bowler hat. Poirot felt the puzzle tightening around him. And Monsieur Charles told you? Nothing? Nothing, Armand said. But he paid me extra to say nothing, to see nothing. Poirot's expression froze in polite disapproval. And yet you saw plenty. Armand swallowed. His knife, still in hand, reflected the dim kitchen light. Poirot continued gently. One final question, chef. On the night of the murder, did you notice anything else? Anything unusual? Armand's answer came hesitantly. I found ashes. Poirot stiffened. Ashes? In the sink, as though someone burned small scraps of paper, then tried to wash the remnants away. But paper ashes? They cling, very difficult to disguise. Poirot considered this. Did you save any? Armand nodded. A few particles, in a jar. Poirot's admiration glowed. Very wise, chef. Might I see them? Armand retrieved the small glass jar from a high shelf. Poirot held it up to the light. The fragments were too small to read, but not too small to analyze. He tucked the jar into his coat. Merci, chef. You have been most helpful. Armand nodded silently, returning to his work. Poirot reached the doorway but paused, glancing back at the hulking figure, now chopping vegetables with renewed intensity. Chef Armand, he said softly, if you hear footsteps again, or the sound of metal in the pantry, come to me immediately. Armand met his gaze, eyes cold but earnest. If I hear anything, Monsieur Poirot, I will not go to you. Poirot frowned. No, Armand said darkly. "I will go after the intruder myself." Poirot left the kitchen with a heaviness in his chest. For the first time in the case, he felt something very close to dread. Chapter 6. Poirot questions the living and the dead. The morning in Bexley Manor dawned with a bleak, water-washed pallor, the sort of dim, reluctant light that seems to seep rather than rise. Hercule Poirot found it strangely fitting. A house so shrouded in tension deserved a day without warmth. In the grand dining hall, now empty except for the ticking mantel clock, Poirot walked slowly along the table's edge, fingertips brushing the polished oak as though reading its grain for secrets. Every creak of the old mansion resonated like a whispered accusation. He had slept little, though he looked immaculate. Hastings, bleary-eyed and obediently alert, followed him with a notebook clutched in hand. "Poirot," he whispered, "I cannot shake the feeling that everyone here is lying." Poirot did not turn but offered a soft hum of agreement. "Mais oui, Hastings. But lies are the perfume of murder. They cling to everyone in the vicinity. Our task is to identify which scent is genuine and which merely masks the stench beneath." They began the morning interrogations. They summoned Mrs. Eleanor Rathbone first. She entered the drawing-room with the poise of a woman accustomed to both admiration and scrutiny. A flowing silk shawl trailed behind her like smoke, her fingers trembling only slightly as she adjusted it. "Madame," Poirot greeted politely, "you appear distressed." She exhaled, long and unsteady. "Inspector Graves is prowling about the house like a wolf, and now you ask for questioning. I told you everything last night." Poirot motioned gently for her to sit. "Non, madame. Last night you told me everything you wanted me to believe. Now, you will tell me the truth." Her lips pressed thin. Hastings began jotting notes. Poirot folded his hands. "Your relationship with Mr. Hawthorne was more involved than you admitted, n'est-ce pas?" A tremor passed through her shoulders. "I admired him, that is all." "But admiration does not require secret late-night conversations in the garden," Poirot replied lightly. "Or money passed discreetly from his hand to yours." Mrs. Rathbone's eyes widened. How did you?" Poirot smiled ever so faintly. When one wishes to hide something, one should not drop a torn remnant of a banknote behind a rose bush. Now her composure cracked. She clasped her hands tightly. "It wasn't what you think. I asked him for help, financial help. My husband, he gambles, compulsively. We were drowning." Hastings's pen froze mid-stroke. Poirot regarded her with affectionate pity. "Madame, this is a misery, yes, but misery is not murder." Her breath hitched. For a moment she looked almost relieved, until Poirot leaned forward. "But your husband, does he know of this request, of Hawthorne's kindness?" A flicker of alarm crossed her face. Poirot filed it away silently, like a card shuffled into the correct deck. Next was Clara Dorsey, the undercook. A timid girl. With reddened eyes, she kept twisting her apron as though wringing invisible water. Hastings gave her a reassuring smile. "Nothing to fear, Miss Dorsey. Just tell us what you heard." She nodded vigorously. I was in the pantry, sir, about 9:30. I heard voices in the corridor, Mr. Hawthorne and someone else. A man. He sounded angry, very angry." Poirot leaned in. "What did he say?" She swallowed. "He said, 'If you breathe a word, I swear it will be your last.'" Poirot exchanged a sharp glance with Hastings. "And Mr. Hawthorne?" Poirot asked. "He said, 'I have already decided. It must end tonight.'" Clara shivered. Then footsteps, then silence. Poirot tapped his fingers lightly on the armrest. "And you did not see who the second man was?" "No, sir. I only heard. Them. Poirot nodded. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. But inwardly he frowned. A threat, a confrontation, and Hawthorne announcing something was ending tonight. What exactly? Inspector Graves met Poirot in the corridor, like a general challenging an interloper. I've spoken with the staff, the estate, the neighbours, everyone, he snapped. And I'll tell you this, your suspects look guilty enough without your foreign theatrics. Poirot lifted an eyebrow. Foreign theatrics, mon ami, you wound me? Graves crossed his arms. The valet, Alistair Finch, had no alibi. The socialite had motive, the butler had access, the cook had opportunity. This is a simple domestic crime. Poirot's voice cooled a degree. There is nothing simple, Inspector, about a murder wrapped in layers. You see only what is on the surface. And you see ghosts. Poirot smiled thinly. Sometimes, Inspector, the ghosts are far more truthful than the living. He left Graves fuming and strode elegantly toward the study where the corpse had been found. Poirot entered the study and inhaled deeply. The air still held the faint scent of cigar smoke and the metallic echo of spilled blood. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, illuminating dust that drifted like silent snow. A glint caught his eye. He knelt. Hastings leaned over. What is it, Poirot? A fragment, Poirot murmured. A clue overlooked. Regarde, mon ami. It was a sliver of dark green fabric, caught on the lower hinge of the desk. Poirot's expression sharpened. This fabric, this is not from Mr. Hawthorne's clothing, and it was torn with force. Hastings blinked. From the killer? Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he crossed to the bookshelf and examined a gap between volumes. A missing ledger, he whispered. The records Hawthorne was compiling. They are gone. Hastings frowned. But who would need them? Poirot gave him a long stare. One with something to hide, something Hawthorne discovered, and something dangerous enough to kill to conceal. He moved toward the fireplace. And look, ashes swept clean but not perfectly. He lifted a burnt scrap of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Hawthorne's meticulous pen strokes. Poirot murmured softly. He tried to destroy evidence. It seems he failed utterly. Poirot pieced the burnt remnants carefully on the table. Slowly, delicately, he aligned the charred edges until a portion of text revealed itself. Rath must confront him before too late. Hastings inhaled sharply. Rathbone, the husband! Poirot lifted a finger. Non, Hastings, do not leap. We have only a fragment. It could be Rathbone, or Rathwell, or Rathers, but... He examined the scrap again, eyes narrowing. The stroke of the final letter is distinctive. This is no plural. It is a name. Hastings swallowed. So Hawthorne intended to confront someone with a name beginning Rath, and he believed time was running out. Poirot straightened, and more importantly, whoever this person is, they knew Hawthorne was coming for them. A heavy silence fell. Then, from the hallway, a sudden crash of breaking glass echoed sharply through the manor. Hastings jumped. What on earth? Poirot's voice turned cold and precise. Come, Hastings, our murderer grows nervous. He strode towards the door, little grey cells already dancing, and somewhere in the manor, someone had just made a desperate mistake. Chapter 7. The Shattered Glass and the Shifting Shadows. The crash reverberated through Bexley Manor like a gunshot, slicing through the already tense atmosphere. Poirot moved swiftly, surprisingly swiftly for his tidy, compact frame, his patent leather shoes tapping sharply across the wooden corridor. Hastings hurried behind, heart thudding with the thrill of pursuit. They reached the source, a narrow side hallway lined with portraits of forgotten aristocrats. A vase lay shattered upon the floor, its fragments scattered like jagged petals. The stand beside it wobbled precariously. Poirot crouched, inspecting the debris. No ordinary accident, he murmured. Someone brushed this deliberately, or in haste. Hastings scanned the dim corridor. But why run this way? It leads only to the linen room and the servants' stairwell. Poirot rose. Precisely. A route used by those who wish not to be seen. He straightened a crooked portrait slightly askew on the wall. And someone was here less than a minute before us. A faint scuffling echoed below. Quick, nervous steps on wooden stairs. Poirot's moustache twitched. We follow. The stairwell was narrow, cold, and steep. Poirot descended cautiously, fingertips grazing the rough stone wall. At the bottom, they reached a dim corridor, leading toward the kitchens and storage rooms. A draught carried the smell of spices, onions, and something else, something metallic, uneasy. Poirot paused, then pointed. A small fleck of green fabric lay caught on a nail protruding from the wall. Hastings inhaled. Poirot, that matches the fragment found on Hawthorne's desk. Poirot nodded gravely. Oui, our visitor passed this way. They moved forward, steps slow and watchful. At the end of the corridor stood a half-open door. Light spilled from it in a trembling, sickly glow. Poirot pushed it fully open. Inside, they found Alistair Finch, the valet, pale, sweating, and clutching a small box as though it might vanish if he loosened his grip. His normally calm demeanour was cracked like the shattered vase upstairs. "Mr. Finch," Hastings breathed, "what are you doing down here?" Finch startled, almost dropping the box. I was simply retrieving something. The house is in disarray, sir. I heard a noise, thought someone needed assistance." Poirot cut him off gently. "Non, monsieur, spare us the inventions. You fled through the side corridor. You knocked over the vase. You descended the stairwell. And now you hide with this box. Why?" Finch's throat bobbed. This is all a misunderstanding. Truly." Poirot stepped closer. "What is in the box?" For a moment, Finch looked ready to bolt. Instead, with trembling fingers, he extended the wooden case toward Poirot. Poirot opened it. Inside lay a set of letters tied with ribbon, and beneath them a gold pocket watch engraved with the initials E.R. Hastings blinked. Eleanor Rathbone? Finch nearly collapsed. She gave them to me for safekeeping, personal matters, nothing to do with the murder." Poirot examined Finch's agonized expression. "Your loyalty to Mrs. Rathbone is touching, admirable, but extremely inconvenient. These letters, do they concern Mr. Hawthorne?" Finch hesitated. Too long. Poirot snapped the box shut. "Très bien. You are lying, and badly." Finch's face flushed with shame. "Please, sir, I beg you, she is innocent." Poirot studied him with a sudden softness. "The innocent do not require such fervent protectors. The guilty do." Finch opened his mouth, but footsteps erupted in the hallway, and a voice boomed, "Step away from him, Poirot!" Inspector Graves stormed in, 2 constables behind him. His expression was red, thunderous. "You have overstepped, Poirot. You are interrogating without my authority." Poirot offered a delicate shrug. "I interrogate no one, mon ami. I merely ask questions. It is the natural curiosity of a humble Belgian." "Spare me," Graves growled. "Finch is my witness, and you're terrorizing him." Finch looked torn, glancing desperately between Graves and Poirot. Poirot's voice remained calm, almost weary. "Inspector, if you intend to protect him, you will first need to understand from what." Graves snorted. "Poirot, you weave conspiracies where none exist. A servant running from a broken vase hardly makes him a killer. Poirot replied gently, but a servant carrying letters, implicating a married woman in a midnight garden rendezvous with the victim. Ah, Inspector, that complicates the matter, no? Graves stiffened. Hand over the box? Poirot held it behind his back. No. Graves stepped forward furiously. Poirot! Poirot spoke quietly. If you wish to remove evidence before it can be examined, then I will be forced to conclude you know precisely what it contains. Silence. A dangerous silence. Graves's jaw clenched, muscles ticking. Hastings swallowed. Poirot, are you suggesting? Poirot lifted his hand. Not suggesting, observing. The inspector grows agitated whenever we approach the truth. Graves bristled. You are playing a dangerous game, Poirot. Poirot gave a tiny bow. Always. Finch stepped forward suddenly, courage trembling in his voice. Inspector, sir, with respect. Mr. Hawthorne gave me one of these letters himself. He said that if anything happened to him, I was to pass it to Mr. Poirot. Graves spun. What? Finch nodded miserably. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't want trouble. But now, sir, Mr. Hawthorne was afraid. Poirot's gaze sharpened like a blade. Give it to me, he whispered. Finch untied the ribbon and handed Poirot a single folded page. Poirot opened it carefully. Hastings leaned in. The handwriting was unmistakably Hawthorne's. If the ledger disappears, then I am betrayed. And the betrayer walks in this house, wearing trust like a mask. I will confront him or her before midnight. If I do not return, the truth lies with the one whose initials are R. Hastings exhaled sharply. R again? Rathbone, Poirot murmured. Or Rathwell. Or even Inspector Graves reminds me. Your first name is Graves barked. Don't. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Reginald Graves, R.G., interesting. Graves's face purpled. Poirot, if you imply I murdered the man, I will. Poirot lifted a calming hand. No, Inspector, I imply nothing. I only note what the victim wrote. He folded the letter with exquisite precision, and I note your fear. Before Graves could retort, a shrill cry echoed through the corridor. A maid burst into the basement room, pale as flour. Mr. Poirot! Inspector, it's Mr. Rathbone! He's gone! Hastings stiffened. Gone? What do you mean, gone? The maid wrung her hands. He left a note, and his coat is missing, and, oh God, the revolver from his desk drawer is missing too. Poirot's expression hardened, every line of his face sharpening with purpose. A man vanishing with a weapon, he said softly, is either a hunter. He turned toward the stairwell. Your prey. He looked at Hastings. Hurry, the killer is no longer waiting. He strode out, voice ringing. Now the game changes. Chapter 8. The Hunt Through the Storm. The sky above Bexley Manor had darkened to the shade of bruised velvet, clouds rolling in like a silent army preparing for siege. Wind battered the tall windows, sending branches scraping against the panes in skeletal fingers. Inside the manor, Poirot stood in the front foyer, coat buttoned, hat polished, every detail precise, even as chaos mounted around him. Hastings hurried in, breathless. Poirot! The staff have searched every wing. Rathbone is nowhere in the house. Poirot nodded once. Then he has left, mon ami, and with a revolver no less. A guilty man runs, sometimes toward rescue, sometimes toward destruction. Inspector Graves appeared next, boots muddy, expression grim. My men found footprints on the west terrace, fresh. They lead toward the orchard. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Toward the old gardener's shed, yes. A symbolic place, I think, away from the main paths. Secluded, a perfect location for a meeting or a confrontation. Thunder boomed, shaking dust from the rafters. Poirot adjusted his gloves. "We go!" The wind tore at them the moment they stepped outside. Rain began to fall in hesitant drops, soon quickening to a cold, insistent drizzle. The orchard stretched before them, a maze of twisted branches and wet leaves that glistened like tiny mirrors. Hastings shivered. "It feels wrong out here, Poirot, as though someone is watching." Poirot replied softly, "Someone is, mon ami. The murderer often watches the hunt for his own discovery. It is a morbid pleasure." They followed the trail of footprints, heavy, staggering impressions in the wet soil, leading toward a cluster of aging sheds that hunched like old men beneath the storm's fury. Inspector Graves held a lantern aloft. Its light quivered in the wind, casting wild shadows. "Over there!" he barked, pointing. A faint glow seeped through the cracked wooden slats of the largest shed. Poirot raised a hand. "Slowly, the man inside is armed." Hastings swallowed hard. Poirot pushed the shed door gently. It creaked open with a long, trembling groan. Inside, the air smelled of oil, damp straw, and fear. At a workbench sat Mr. Leonard Rathbone, his face ghost-white, clothes soaked, hair plastered to his skull. In his trembling hand, he clutched the missing revolver. The lantern beside him cast a hollow light across his features. Eyes wide, haunted, desperate. "Stay back!" he cried, voice cracking. I won't be taken like some criminal." Poirot stepped forward slowly, palms raised. "Monsieur Rathbone, no one comes to harm you. We come only to talk." Rathbone laughed, a broken, strangled sound. "Talk? You want the truth? I'll give you truth. I met Hawthorne last night. Yes, we fought. Yes, he threatened to expose my debts, my failures. He would have ruined me." Inspector Graves stiffened. "So you killed him?" The revolver shook violently in Rathbone's grip. "No, blast you, no! I stormed out after our argument, yes, but I swear I left him alive. When I returned later, the study door was ajar, and he was dead." Hastings frowned. "Then why run?" Rathbone's face twisted. "Because someone wants me framed. Someone planted the ledger pages in my desk drawer. Someone told Hawthorne about my debts. Someone who hates me." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And this someone, did they also have access to the revolver?" Rathbone stared at the gun as though seeing it for the first time. I don't know. I kept it locked. But the key, anyone could have taken it, anyone." Wind howled through the boards, rattling the shed like a dying beast. Poirot moved one step closer. "Monsieur Rathbone, you ran because you are afraid, but not of the police." Rathbone's eyes glistened. "Poirot! He said he knew who had betrayed him. Hawthorne said he would confront that person before midnight. I feared, he meant me." Poirot shook his head gently. "Monsieur, your name begins with R, yes, but the victim's note, his suspicion, was broader. It could be many names, many faces." Rathbone lowered the revolver an inch. "Then who? Who betrayed him?" Poirot's voice softened. "That, monsieur, is what I intend to discover." A sudden roar of thunder extinguished the lantern, plunging the shed into darkness. Hastings yelped, and Rathbone gasped, raising the revolver again. Poirot whispered sharply, "Do not fire!" Inspector Graves relit the lantern with trembling fingers. The light flickered back, and Poirot noticed something near the door. A single muddy footprint, distinct, fresh, half-washed by rain. But its shape was unmistakable. A narrow heel, a pointed toe, a delicate curve, a woman's shoe. Poirot crouched immediately, studying it with intense concentration. His face grew still. Hastings whispered, "Poirot, that print, it could belong to Mrs. Rathbone." Poirot did not answer. Inspector Graves stepped forward. "So the wife has joined the game?" Poirot rose slowly. "No, Inspector. That footprint was made only moments ago. Someone has been listening to everything we said." A cold dread crept along Hastings's spine. "Then she, whoever she is still nearby?" Poirot nodded. "Murderers often return to the scene. They crave control, and eavesdropping gives them power." He turned sharply and threw open the shed door. The orchard was empty, only branches thrashing in the storm. But Poirot's gaze drifted to the darkened path leading back toward the manor. Someone had been watching. Someone had slipped quietly away. They escorted Rathbone back to the house, where servants whispered anxiously in corners like spooked birds. Mrs. Rathbone was nowhere to be found. Neither was Finch the valet. Poirot entered the drawing-room, rain dripping from his hat brim. He stood before the fireplace, arms crossed behind his back, mind whirring like a machine of perfect gears. Hastings approached hesitantly. "Poirot, do you believe Rathbone?" Poirot nodded once. "He lies about many things, but not the killing. His fear is genuine, too genuine." Inspector Graves stomped in, frustrated. "We've got a murderer walking free in this house, and now a woman eavesdropping on us. Poirot, whoever she is, she's clever." Poirot murmured, "Clever is not the word, Inspector. She is calculating. She moves silently. She manipulates with precision. And she leaves behind just enough clues to shift suspicion from herself." Hastings blinked. "You speak as though you know who she is." Poirot gave a slow, enigmatic smile. "The little grey cells illuminate many things, mon ami. But proof? Proof is the mistress I must court carefully." He turned from the fire. "And tonight I shall trap our elusive lady in a web of her own making." The grandfather clock chimed 11. Poirot gathered the household in the grand dining hall, those present, those missing noted with grim silence. He addressed them calmly, voice clear and steady. "Mesdames et messieurs, the murderer sits among you. And this person has made a fatal error, one I intend to reveal." The room stirred, whispers thickening like fog. Poirot lifted a hand. "At midnight, I shall present the evidence that unmasks the killer. Until then, no one leaves this manor." Hastings inhaled sharply. "Poirot, you sound certain." Poirot straightened, eyes gleaming with quiet fire. "I am beyond certain, Hastings." He looked up at the darkened balcony overlooking the hall. "And our murderer listens still." Thunder cracked. The lights flickered. And somewhere in the shadows above, a soft, unmistakable footstep echoed. Chapter 9. Night of Masks and Revelations. The storm raged harder as the clock in the dining hall ticked toward midnight, each second falling with the weight of a hammer. The air inside Bexley Manor was thick, a stew of fear, suspicion, and something else Poirot sensed like a faint, bitter perfume. Anticipation. Someone in this house awaited his mistake. Someone wanted him misled. Poirot stood at the head of the long mahogany table, candlelight dancing across his immaculate suit. Hastings hovered to his right while Inspector Graves stood rigid as a statue, arms crossed, jaw tight. The remaining household members sat uneasily. Mr. Rathbone, trembling but defiant. Mrs. Eleanor Rathbone, looking pale and evasive. Chef Armand, arms folded, a knife tucked into his belt. Finch the valet shuffling nervously, and two maids, frightened and whispering behind teacups. Poirot tapped the table gently. "Mes amis, we approach the hour when truth shall stand unmasked. But before the final reveal, there are matters we must discuss. Matters of shadows, of secrets, and of the very heart of this mystery." A lightning flash lit the hall. illuminating every tense face. Poirot began pacing the length of the table, hands clasped behind him. "Let us return," he said, "to last night, just before midnight. Mr. Hawthorne, our unfortunate victim, wrote a final message, a warning that the one who betrayed him had initials beginning with R. But, as with all cryptic clues, we must look deeper." He paused behind Rathbone, who stiffened. "Mr. Rathbone, your argument with Hawthorne was heated, certainly, but you did not return to kill him." Gasps murmured around the table. Rathbone's shoulders sagged, relief warping into confusion. Then he truly believed it was someone else. "Oui," Poirot said softly. "Someone he trusted deeply. Someone who knew his routines. Someone inside this very manor." Poirot moved on. Hawthorne left his study to confront that person just as he wrote he would, but he never reached them. Instead, the killer intercepted him. Mrs. Rathbone's hand flew to her mouth. "Intercepted? But where?" Poirot's eyes glistened in the candlelight. "In the kitchen." Chef Armand froze, muscles tightening like coiled rope. Poirot nodded. "Yes, mon chef. Hawthorne walked into your kingdom last night. Alive." Poirot gestured toward Armand. "You heard the truth from the chef himself. Hawthorne entered the kitchen after midnight. But it was not he who stole the razor-sharp filleting knife. It was taken before he arrived." Armand's jaw tightened. "And I said so. I told you. Someone was in my kitchen before him." Poirot lifted a finger. "Precisely. A second visitor. A shadow. One that entered quietly, without leaving a trace." He turned sharply toward Finch. Or so they thought. Finch jumped. What do you mean?" Poirot smiled. "The green fabric fragment found snagged in the stairwell. It matched the colour of your livery jacket. But not the weave. It was coarser. And you, Finch, were wearing your full uniform at the time." Finch blinked in confusion. Poirot's voice sharpened. "The fragment belonged to a robe, a dressing robe, one worn by a woman." The maids gasped. Poirot looked up at the balcony. "And tonight, in the orchard shed, we found a fresh footprint, a woman's footprint. A woman who followed us. A woman who listens from shadows." Poirot stepped toward the centre of the room, lightning casting his silhouette long across the floor. "Let us examine the suspects of feminine persuasion," Poirot said softly. "The maids? No, they have neither access nor motive. Mrs. Rathbone, she is anxious, yes, but her guilt is emotional, not murderous. No, mes amis." He turned slowly, theatrically. "The woman who wore the green robe, who crept through the halls unnoticed, who knew where the knife was kept, who listened from the balcony not 10 minutes ago," he pointed upward, "is not here at all." Shock rippled through the room. Poirot continued, "She is missing. She has been missing since the moment we returned from the orchard." Hastings gasped. "Poirot! You don't mean—" Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Where is Miss Clara Bennet, the secretary?" The question hit the room like a dropped chandelier. The maids looked at each other, visibly rattled. She went to fetch tea, sir, right after you returned." "And she never returned," Poirot finished. Inspector Graves growled. "Are you telling me the secretary, the quiet little mouse, killed Mr. Hawthorne? Absurd!" Poirot's voice deepened. "On the contrary, she is the only one who could." Poirot's pacing slowed, each step deliberate. Miss Bennet had access to Hawthorne's documents, his ledger, his private letters. She knew of his investigation into illicit financial dealings, dealings that led to large sums vanishing from accounts she managed. Rathbone gasped. "The missing funds! Poirot! You think she—" Poirot nodded. "She forged signatures using her excellent skills in imitation. She leaked information to Hawthorne's enemies, and when Hawthorne grew suspicious, she panicked. Mrs. Rathbone whispered. But why kill him? Poirot turned, eyes burning with certainty, because Hawthorne confronted her. He told her he knew. He followed her to the kitchen. He confronted her there, and in desperation, she used the nearest available weapon. Armand flinched. My filleting knife. Poirot bowed his head. She struck once, clean, deep, guided by careful knowledge of anatomy she claimed to have learned while assisting the doctor during the influenza outbreak. Hastings swallowed hard. And the burning? He asked quietly. Poirot nodded. She destroyed documents that proved her guilt. That was the ash chef Armand discovered. Inspector Graves hammered his fist on the table. Then where is she now? Where has she gone? Poirot turned toward the dark hall behind them. That is the most interesting question, Inspector. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the manor, followed by a scream. Everyone jumped to their feet. Poirot's eyes narrowed. She has returned, he whispered, voice like steady ice. She has been listening, and now, hearing the truth I have spoken, she makes her move. Graves drew his weapon. Poirot, where is she? Poirot looked toward the grand staircase. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. She is exactly where a cornered killer stands, between escape and murder. Thunder rolled. A shadow appeared at the top of the stairs, and the glint of a knife flashed in her hand. Chapter 10. The Unmasking and the Last Slice of Truth. The shadow at the top of the grand staircase did not flinch. Candlelight flickered across the polished rail, glinting off the blade clutched in trembling fingers. Poirot's small, meticulous frame seemed unthreatened, but his eyes, dark, sharp, and unyielding, fixed the figure with surgical precision. Stop, Poirot said quietly, each syllable measured. There is no escape. Not from the house, not from justice, not from yourself. The shadow hesitated, a pause that stretched like elastic. Then, with a trembling gasp, it stepped forward. Miss Clara Bennet, Hawthorne's secretary, emerged fully into the light, robe soaked from the rain outside, hair plastered to her face. Her pale eyes darted from Poirot to Rathbone to Graves, then back. Poirot's voice softened, almost kindly. Mesdemoiselles, it is over. There is nowhere to run. She sank to her knees suddenly, knife slipping from her grasp. Tears mingled with rain and sweat. I didn't mean, he found out. He would ruin everything. Poirot knelt, folding his hands neatly in front of him. You speak truth, and yet omit it in terror. Tell us everything. Her voice came in quick, gasping bursts. Hawthorne discovered the ledger, the missing funds. He knew I had falsified entries. He confronted me in the kitchen. I panicked. I took the filleting knife from Chef Armand's rack. It was sharp, fast, one blow. I didn't plan. She buried her face in her hands. And then I burned the papers. I tried to hide the evidence. I didn't know what else to do. Poirot's gaze remained steady, unwavering. And the letters entrusted to Finch? She looked up, startled. They were personal, meant to mislead anyone who might suspect me. Hawthorne didn't see them. Poirot inclined his head slightly. Indeed, a clever, if desperate, diversion. Poirot stood and gestured to Finch. You, monsieur, were faithful in guarding these letters. Yet unwittingly you preserved a clue. The missing document fragments and the tiny fleck of green fabric. Had you been careless, the evidence might have vanished entirely. Finch nodded weakly. I only did as she asked. Poirot continued, pacing slowly along the length of the grand hall. And Chef Armand, a man of meticulous order, your kitchen became the stage of the crime. the missing knife, the charred ash, the disturbance noticed by your keen senses. All these details allowed the puzzle to remain solvable. Your vigilance prevented further chaos. Armand inclined his head, expression solemn. A lesson in attention, Monsieur Poirot, I understand. Poirot turned to Rathbone. And you, monsieur, were innocent of murder, though your fear drove you into the night. That fear, combined with your weapon left behind, provided an excellent red herring. Yet your presence at key moments, and your testimony, helped narrow suspicion. Rathbone exhaled, relief flooding his features. So, I was suspected, but not guilty. Poirot inclined his head. Correct, mon ami. And now the guilty party reveals herself. He turned his full attention to Clara Bennet. You acted alone, but your careful planning, your knowledge of the household, your access to Hawthorne's affairs, these were all pieces of a tapestry you thought hidden. She whispered, voice barely audible. I thought no one would know. Poirot's small smile was almost tender. Ah, but I do not merely observe. I deduce, and the little grey cells illuminate what others wish concealed. Graves stepped forward, expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. Poirot, you're telling me all this was the work of the secretary? A woman! Impossible! Poirot's eyes, cold and measured, met Graves's. Impossible. Only if one underestimates desperation and opportunity. She had both. Graves's hands trembled slightly as he took out his handcuffs. Then she'll face the law. Clara Bennet's shoulders slumped. Yes, I suppose so. Poirot observed her carefully. Justice is not vengeance, but the truth must be recognized, even when it is bitter. Poirot directed Finch to place the charred fragments on the table, reconstructing what remained of Hawthorne's ledger and letters. Slowly, the story emerged. The falsified entries, the embezzled funds, the final confrontation in the kitchen. Each piece fit with the accounts provided by Rathbone, Armand, and even the terrified maids who had glimpsed shadows in the storm. Poirot leaned over the fragments. Notice, Hastings, how desperation grows like a weed. One crime leads to another. The theft of a ledger, the panic, the killing, the attempt to destroy evidence, and yet even small fragments, ash, a scrap of paper, a footprint, reveal everything. Hastings nodded, admiration evident. It's brilliant, Poirot. You saw it all, every misstep. Poirot's expression was modest. The human heart is not difficult to read, Hastings. Fear leaves traces, guilt leaves traces. And those who attempt cunning, above all, leave themselves exposed. The household slowly exhaled. Chef Armand retreated to his kitchen, already preparing supper with renewed energy. Finch returned letters and notes to their rightful places, grateful for the end of tension. Rathbone was comforted by his wife, who, though shaken, had not been guilty of any wrongdoing. Even the maids regained their composure, glancing at Poirot with a mixture of awe and relief. Poirot turned to Hastings. Mon ami, the house is restored to order, the guilty apprehended. But let this night serve as a reminder. Even in the grandest homes, ambition, greed, and fear can fester unseen. Hastings sighed, exhausted but satisfied, and all because of your little grey cells. Poirot's smile was small but content. Exactly, Hastings. Petites cellules grises, the keys to truth. As the storm outside subsided into a drizzle, Poirot walked alone to the grand window overlooking the orchard. He gazed at the wet branches, swaying gently in the moonlight. The world, he murmured, is full of secrets. Some are small, some are monstrous. And yet they all whisper. They all wait for the patient eye, the careful mind, the heart that does not panic. He turned back to the now calm dining hall, where the household quietly settled into tentative peace. Yes, he whispered softly, almost to himself, justice has been served, and the little grey cells have triumphed once again. A soft wind rustled through the manor, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and the lingering shadow of mystery, now resolved, yet always ready to awaken with the next whisper of greed, fear, or desire.